rememberers. Does anyone know a little flower called the Pelargonium or scented geranium? Really, really strong smelling, grows by cuttings. This is a flower from the continent of Africa. It followed us here. The cuttings followed us here. And for a long time, I don't think we understood why this flower wanted to hang out with us and stick with us. It really wasn't until the 1980s that we started to experience the crisis of lead poisoning in the Black community. My own daughter, Nashima, when she was 1 year old, she'd come along with us. We were urban gardeners urban farmers in Worcester, Massachusetts at the time, and she would come along as we took vacant lots and reformed them into food oases and worked with youth and all of that good stuff. But we took her to her 1 year checkup, and she had lead poisoning. Terrifying. Parents in the room, you know how that feels when you find out something's wrong with your child and it's your fault. It wasn't from the home, it was from the soil. So like good activist parents, we started going around and testing the soils. The city had never bothered to do it. Nobody was really talking about that at the time. Now the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, sets the safe limit of soil lead at 400 parts per million. Still too high. We tested levels as high as 11,000 parts per million in children's playgrounds and gardens. That's super fun sight. Right? So that's what our children are being exposed to. So we start organizing. We got a whole group of teens together. These are actual hazmat suits they're wearing. And we use the Pelargonium, which is a hyperaccumulator, to clean the lead out of the soils of the entire city of Worcester. The city gave them a contract. This was a youth-led business. They made money, and they repaired the gardens, the playgrounds, and the public areas of the city of Worcester with this sacred African flower that came with us on our journey. We remember how to heal the soil. Our folks, ever since the colonizers came to Africa, they were pushing us off of the most valuable and rich and dark soils. That happened here in the United States to indigenous people. It definitely happened on the continent of Africa. So we had to figure out what to do with these swampy and marginal, degraded hillsides, these areas that were rejected by the government itself as not suitable for agriculture. And we as farmers, it was no different for us. We could only afford lands in Grafton where everyone was tisking and shaking their head like, you can't farm there? Are you nuts? That's forest country, that's not farm country. So when we first got to the lands, my left hand is what the soil looks like. That's topsoil, supposedly, on the left. After 8 years of applying strictly Afro-Indigenous farming methods, that's what we have on the right. Right? We remember. And it's not just the composting and the cover cropping and the raised beds and the rotational grazing, right? It's also remembering those spiritual practices of dance, of song, of prayer. We also remember our mindfulness. Remember the leaf in the mouth? There are many meditation practices that came with us that tune in our ear to be able to hear the language of the earth. One of them is called stone balancing. We learned stone balancing in Haiti, in Haiti. It's warrior training. You may or may not know that in 1791, enslaved Africans in Haiti got together at a secret meeting in the woods at Bois Caïma because they'd had enough. Slavery everywhere was really awful. Slavery in Haiti was widely known as the most brutal in the colonies. Once you got to the island, your average life expectancy was 8 more years. So most of the people in Haiti were actually from Africa because they didn't live long enough to have children. They decided together at that meeting that they would rather die than spend another day enslaved. They had witnessed their cousins, their brothers, their siblings be punished with amputation, with being boiled alive in cane syrup, with being rolled down the hill in barrels studded with spikes. So they had a prayer meeting, and they called on all their gods. They called on Esligantor, they called on Ogun, they made sacrifices, they pledged liberty or death. And then they went forth armed with nothing more than plant poisons and fire. And by 1804, they defeated the most powerful army in the world, which was Napoleon's army. Woo! They became the first free Black republic and the first republic in the world to outlaw slavery. So when you look into the history, though, to understand how the warriors trained, they didn't train with guns, right? They trained with mindfulness. They balanced stones, because when you balance a stone, you have to be able to feel for the center point of its balance and its weight. And in order to do that, you have to still your mind enough to hear all the voices of all the divine beings around you who will guide you. And so when we go to Haiti every year to work with our farmers and comrades, this is the warrior training that we offer to our children. We also remember our ancestral practices, our ancestral ways. Because in our cosmology, we believe that it's important, to quote Sweet Honey in the Rock, that we listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters. The dead are not under the earth, right? In our belief system, the ancestors are right here with us at all times. They're behind us, they're in front of us, they're to the sides, they're above, they're below, they're in our ear, they're in our dreams, they're whispering truth. They're just waiting for us to tune in our ear and listen to them back. And we are never, ever, ever alone. And so that's another seed that we pass on to our children. These are the babies from the Liberation on Land Youth Immersion, one of the programs that we have at Soul Fire Farm. And in their hand, they have a special tool called an Igi Iku. Can you say that? Igi Iku. It means staff of the ancestors. So you go out into the woods, you make an offering, you wait to see which tree wants to come with you, harvest that tree, carve and decorate it in the shape and impression that you have of your ancestors. And that becomes the staff that you pound when you're calling them to come and give you support. So all of these children now know also that they are not and never will be alone. We brought with us our festivals. This time of year, actually this week, we have a very important festival called Manya. Manya is the yam harvest festival. The yam is the king of crops in West Africa. It is the staple food. It is drought tolerant. It is flood tolerant. It is super climate resilient. And it's alive in a spiritual sense. We have a belief that the yam itself has a spirit that's called Nyoku. And the Nyoku spirit is very particular. The Nyoku spirit does not abide by quarreling, and it will not allow itself to be consumed amongst people who despise each other. So before you sit down to eat the first yams of the year, you have to go all around in your community and your family and make up. Think about that. Every fall, I know this is true in the Jewish community too, every fall you gotta go around and you got a week and you gotta make up with everybody so you can come together and eat the yams. And this is such a beautiful festival because the way it's been adapted in the diaspora, since we're so far from our original homeland, is that we take a spiritual journey back to the continent in order to get reinvigorated. So we take a whole bunch of banana leaves, and bananas are chosen because they regenerate. So they represent the divinity which never ends or never dies. You take banana leaves and you cover the entire floor with banana leaves. You put the yams on one side to the east, the people on the other side to the west, because which way is Africa? East, from here, yeah. And then you roll your body across the banana leaves until you reach Africa, which we call Guinea, the land of the ancestors. You receive the blessing of the yams and the blessing of your homeland, and then you roll back across the banana leaves so that you're fortified to make it over here in the diaspora far from home, right? Now imagine a whole bunch of 3- and 4-year-olds rolling across the banana leaves. It's ridiculously fun. And that's the thing, that our festivals, they're serious, but they're not somber. They're joyful. So the children are making boats and hats out of the banana leaves and just getting all up in that. So Manya Yam will actually have this Thursday at our home. We also remember our songs. It is our belief in West African cosmology that it's actually more important to irrigate your land with song than it is to irrigate it with water. Your plants will become dry and not nourish you if they haven't been fed with song. So I want to teach you this song, and maybe Naima will help me teach it. You come up and help me teach it. So first we'll just do the pronunciation and then we'll do the song. So repeat after me. Chineke,
Chineke,
idima,
idima,
o idima.
o idima.
Chineke,
Chineke,
idima,
idima,
o idima.
o idima.
All right, and there's a little stomp with it, so even if you can't get the words, you get the stomp. So we'll sing a line and you're gonna repeat it, okay? Chineke, idima, o idima. Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, 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 o idima. Idima, Chineke, idima, o idima. Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, 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 o idima. Idima, all right, let's do it all together. It'll be easier. Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, Chineke, idima, o idima. Idima, idima, o idima. Idima, So that song gives praise and thanks for the divine forces. There's a few more things we remember though. We remember our Ifa. Has anyone ever read the Bible? How long did it take you? Long time? Does anyone know how many chapters or books sometimes they're called in the Bible? 66, okay. The Odu Ifa, which is the Bible of the Yoruba people, has 256 books. Each book has between 600 to 800 chapters.
Wow.
The book is memorized. It is not written down. In 2005, the United Nations inscribed the Odu Ifa in the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list because of how sacred and irreplaceable it is. These 256 books are said to cover every possible circumstance that humans and non-human life can find themselves in and offer solutions for any challenges. The way we use them is that you go to a babalao, who is someone who memorized the books. To become a babalao, you have to memorize at least 3 chapters of each of the 256. They do a divination. They use palm nuts, which are pictured below, or the opoile divining chain. They cast it, and a pattern arises that corresponds to one of the books. And then from memory, they chant the stories and the history and the lessons, which advise you about which way to go. So for example, I know from the divinations that I've done that if I want to have a good life and be in alignment with my destiny, I have to always be a farmer, and every year of my life I have to plant maize. And so dutifully, that is what I do. But that might not be your destiny. It also provides instruction about the ways we are to care for the land. For example, in one of the books, which is called Obe Iwori, it talks about the importance of making offerings to the land. You have to actually put down, and I'll get to this a little more later, but water, gin, honey, and things to the land as offerings so that your crops and harvests come in well. Another chapter called Ofunerete warns against taking too much from the land. It warns what happens if you over-harvest the tree or you over-harvest the land and the destruction that will come. And so there's moral lessons and instructions and values. We call our offerings ebo. Can you say that word?
Ebo.
And the way it was most beautifully described to me is, imagine that you go up to an ant and you say to the ant, I really appreciate your services. Thank you so much. What would the ant say to you? Ebo. Well, I haven't met an ant that speaks English yet. So maybe the ant might not understand you. But if you put down some honey, and with the honey you put down the intention, thank you, ant, for your services, how will the ant interact with the honey? It will eat it. The universe speaks the language of the physical and material, for sure, in addition to other languages. So to make sure we're understood in our prayers, we put down offerings of food and resource to say thank you to the living beings and the spirits that help us out. One of those kinds of offerings we did earlier is libation, which you pour down. It's usually liquor or rum that's poured down in homage to the ancestors and the spirits. And this has survived very, very strongly in the Black community. If anyone listens to hip hop or is involved in urban Black community, you know about like tipping to my homies or pouring one out. Any type of funeral or reverence that's given to someone who's passed will accompany, pouring the first bit of your 40 or your rum onto the grounds. We've also remembered our gods. In West African cosmology, the understanding is that the divine one, Olodumare or Maolisa, the divine creator of all things, split itself up into little sparks that had jobs to do on the earth, creating the earth, creating breath, creating morality. And once those jobs were done, the little sparks of the divine became elements of nature, became rivers and mountains and trees and rocks. And so the tree is not like God. The tree does not contain God. The tree actually is God. And you are also God, and you are also God, and you are also God because you have Ori. And these divinities, Azaka and Grambois, those are the divinities of the farm who we pay homage to. We had a kind of awkward situation at Soulfire recently where, most of our programs are for Black and brown folks. But once in a while, we do a program that's specifically for white allies. And so we were doing one of these programs on dismantling racism. And it was clear that the land was not happy. Let's just say there was a strong energy, the land was not happy. And so I went and I did a divination to find out what was going on. And it turns out that Azaka, who's pictured as like a peasant and a everyday person, thought that there was a lot of police on the land. And was like, I don't know about all these police, I'm not really feeling this. And so we made some offerings to try to make it okay to continue with the program. But the condition was that everybody had to go with no shoes and not use a fork. They had to eat with their hands like peasants do. So this was an awkward thing to explain to a bunch of white people who don't understand West African cosmology. I was like, look, we're gonna have to cancel the program unless y'all wanna be barefoot and eat with your hands. But they were into it. They were into it and everything smoothed out and we were able to carry on. But the idea is like human beings are not the center of the universe. Like we're always asking and listening and adjusting what we do. We wanted to dig out the pond and the land didn't want us to dig out the pond for 10 years, so there was no digging. You don't just like go do whatever you want to the earth, you ask. Grandpa is also the guardian of a ceremony called Pile Fe that we do, where we make the medicines. Grandpa is guardian of medicine. And so we make all the medicines for the community every winter and then distribute them through these multi-days of pounding and masticating the herbs, which we'll do in the workshop a little bit later. We haven't forgotten our baths. We go every year pilgrimage to Haiti, where 30,000 people gather in the waterfall to cleanse away all of the burdens of the year. We do this in a very, very sacred place that's sacred to Esli Dantor, the mother of Haiti. And there's a beautiful story that this spirit, Esli Dantor, would show up in trees and people would see her in the trees. And the Catholic priests really freaked out about, their congregants seeing these African spirits in the trees. So they started cutting down the trees. And everyone who cut down a tree would mysteriously die. Like one got run over by a horse, another one died of some internal ailment. And so they stopped cutting down the trees and they just sort of let the people have their ceremonies. But the spiritual bath, even if you don't have a waterfall next to you, we have ways of bringing the bath to us. And finally, I'll mention that it's not just in these traditional communities that the spirit of the seed has carried on. It's in the Black church. I mentioned my great-grandfather, Ural McCullough. and his church being a bastion for civil rights. This is the Detroit Black Community Church Food Security Network, and they are using the church to all the lands on the churches in Baltimore to grow food for their community. They are purchasing food from Black farmers, bringing it into low-income neighborhoods, and they're doing this from a place rooted in their faith and their cosmology. So we remember, and it matters very much that we remember, because if you have a spiritually devoid food system, which we do, this is a result, right? This is a result where you literally have agriculture driving climate chaos, driving the extinction of species, forcing soil into the Gulf of Mexico to create dead zones, right? You have a situation where 85% of the people who labor on farms are Black and brown, yet less than 3% of the people who manage farms are Black and brown and are not protected fairly by labor laws, right? You have a situation where 98% of the farmland is owned by white people, which is more racially skewed than ever before in history. You have a situation where 1 in 3 Black and brown children go to bed hungry every night, right? And rely on emergency food system to get their basic caloric needs met. That's the food system that we have when it's devoid of the lessons of the seeds. And we need the seeds too for our own healing, right? Because as Black folks, to be really honest, the land was the scene of the crime, right? The land was the place where the lynchings took place, and the whippings, and the enslavement, and the sharecropping, and the kidnappings. But the land was never actually the criminal. And the only way to heal our relationship with the earth and to reclaim that dignified and sovereign connection is if we reach back across those 400 or 500 years of land-based oppression to find the seeds our grandmothers left for us and reclaim that deeper story. And we need the seeds because without them, fundamentally, we've forgotten who we are. I'll leave you with a Creole Proverb, which comes originally from the Igbo, but this is in the Creole language. It says, Dim kisa ureme madi ukimu ye, which means tell me what you love, and I'll tell you who you are. Ashe, thank you.